The horizon drifted quietly in orbit around a barren moon. Its hull was scratched and dented, showing layers of repair work that looked more like a patchwork quilt than the sleek frame of a warship. Where other ships gleamed with polished steel and bright insignias, the horizon appeared tired, worn, and almost forgotten. Other crews often joked about it. They called it the relic, the scrap pile, or the museum piece. Whenever it appeared in docking bays alongside modern warships, laughter spread quickly. Captains of alien fleets with their shining ships bristling with advanced weapons shook their heads and wondered why humans bothered to keep such an old craft in service. But to Commander Varro, the horizon was more than metal and circuits. It was a survivor. He walked the narrow corridors, touching the bulkheads as if they were alive. Every dent carried a memory. Every scar on the hull marked a moment when the ship had stood firm against enemies stronger than itself. Varro knew the galaxy's fleets judged by appearances. They looked at numbers, at weapon size, at shield strength. They believed victory came only through power displayed in raw form. But humans were different. Humans believed that victory could be shaped by mind, by heart, and by the ability to turn weakness into strength. The crew of the Horizon understood this truth. They were not the largest crew. They were not equipped with the newest weapons, yet each of them carried experience that no academy could teach. Many of them had served in wars that others had long forgotten. They had seen what arrogance did to fleets. They had seen proud captains fall because they trusted technology more than judgment. On this day, as the Horizon floated above the lonely moon, a meeting was called in the main deck. The crew gathered, some leaning against consoles, others seated on worn benches that had been replaced so many times they no longer matched. Despite the lack of polish, there was pride in the way they carried themselves. Varro stood before them. His uniform was plain, without the shining medals that decorated other commanders, but his voice carried weight. "You all know what they say about us," he began. "They think this ship is nothing but a joke. They think we are slow, outdated, and irrelevant. Let them believe it, because one day that belief will blind them, and when it does, we will be ready." There was silence at first. Then one of the engineers, an older man named Torin, let out a quiet laugh. "They never see us coming," he said. The room filled with nods and small smiles. The crew knew the truth of his words. The Horizon had survived countless skirmishes not by overpowering its foes, but by outthinking them. When enemies expected it to retreat, it advanced. When they tried to pin it down, it slipped through cracks in their formation. Its reputation among outsiders was poor, but its record in survival was unmatched. Still, whispers from the galaxy weighed heavily. Whenever the Horizon docked at shared ports, the crew heard the laughter. Aliens with tall crests or shimmering armor would shake their heads at the sight of the patched ship. Some even offered mock condolences, saying things like, "It is noble of humans to keep their antiques flying." The crew accepted the mockery in silence. They never argued, never tried to prove themselves in words. Instead, they carried on with quiet determination. Outside the windows of the Horizon, the galaxy was preparing for war. Tensions had been building for months. Rumors spread of an enemy fleet gathering strength on the far edge of known space. This force was said to be vast, armed with weapons unseen before, determined to sweep across every system and claim them as their own. The great fleets of the galaxy responded with pride and confidence. They held grand meetings where leaders boasted about their ships, their numbers, and their strategies. Many believed the war would be short, a quick demonstration of superiority. Few considered the cost of arrogance. The Horizon received no invitation to those meetings. It was stationed far away, given a minor patrol near unimportant trade routes. No one expected it to see real action. After all, what could a ship like the Horizon contribute against such a mighty threat? Yet among the crew, there was no disappointment. They understood their role. They had been underestimated before. They knew the galaxy looked past them, and that was fine, because history often remembered not the ships that shone the brightest, but the ones that stood firm when all else failed. Commander Varro looked once more at his crew. "We will not chase glory," he said. "We will not seek recognition, but when the time comes, we will do what we have always done. We will fight, and we will endure." A quiet strength filled the room. The crew rose, each person ready to return to their station. They did not need applause. They did not need respect from outsiders. They had something far greater: trust in each other, and trust in the battered ship that had carried them through every storm. As the horizon turned slowly in the silence of space, no one outside paid attention. No reports mentioned its presence. No fleet counted it among the forces of importance. But deep inside its scarred hull, a story was waiting to be written. A story that would remind the galaxy that the smallest spark, when ignored, could one day blaze into a fire strong enough to change everything. The horizon drifted through the quiet sector, its patched engines humming steadily. To outsiders, it seemed an old warship barely kept alive, but inside its walls, life flowed with rhythm and order. Every member of the crew knew their place, and every corner of the ship carried a story. Commander Varro often said that a warship was only as strong as the people who guided it. The Horizon had been built in another age, with weaker weapons and slower engines than modern ships. Yet its heart lay not in steel but in the hands of those who worked together as if they were one mind. Torin, the chief engineer, had hands covered with burn scars and grease. He knew every bolt of the ship as if it were part of his body. Where other engineers relied on fresh supplies or advanced repair stations, Torin worked with scraps, welding broken parts into something stronger than before. He often told new recruits, "If the ship breathes, I can keep it alive." At the gunnery station, Mira watched over the ancient cannons. Many outsiders dismissed them as weak, but she had mastered them through endless practice. She knew every angle, every adjustment that could wring more power from outdated barrels. Mira did not speak much, but when she aimed, her focus was unshakable. She had once brought down a ship 3 times the size of the Horizon by striking its weak points again and again, until it crumbled. On the bridge, young pilot Kair adjusted the controls with sharp precision. He had not yet seen as many battles as the older crew, but he carried a spark that others respected. Kair could guide the Horizon through asteroid fields where larger ships dared not travel. He moved with instinct, reading the stars as if they whispered secrets only he could hear. Each member of the crew had their strengths. Together they formed a bond stronger than the hull itself. Where other ships relied on technology, the Horizon relied on trust. Every order was followed not because of rank alone, but because they believed in one another. Despite this strength, the crew often felt the sting of the galaxy's laughter. Whenever they entered docking stations, eyes turned toward them with amusement. Sleek alien warships lined the ports, their hulls glowing with fresh paint and advanced design. The Horizon, scarred and dull, seemed out of place among them. One evening, while docked at a shared station, the crew walked through the corridors in search of supplies. A group of alien officers from another fleet stopped them. With smirks, they said, "It is kind of you to bring history with you. Will you place it in a museum after it falls apart in the next skirmish?" Kair clenched his fists, but Mira placed a calming hand on his shoulder. Commander Varro simply answered, "The Horizon has outlived ships far younger than itself. We will see whose vessel remains standing when the storm arrives." Then he turned away, his voice steady but sharp enough to cut through the mockery. The crew left without further words, but the laughter of the officers echoed behind them. Such moments could have broken weaker men and women. Yet for the Horizon, every insult became fuel. They had learned long ago that respect was not given. It was earned through survival. Beyond the stations and the laughter, tension grew in the galaxy. Reports came daily of the enemy fleet's movements. The invaders had already destroyed outposts at the edge of known space. Stories told of entire colonies wiped out in hours. Fleets of proud warships rushed to defend, eager to prove their strength. The Horizon received its orders as well. It was to patrol an unimportant sector, guarding empty trade lanes and forgotten moons. To the commanders of the great fleets, this was the only place for such an old ship. But to Varro and his crew, it was just another chance to prepare. In the dim light of the command deck, the crew gathered again. Varro looked around at the faces that had stood beside him through countless trials. "They believe we are useless," he said. "That is their mistake. When the storm reaches us, we will meet it as we always have, not with fear but with cunning." Torin raised a brow and asked, "And if the storm is larger than anything we have faced before?" Varro's eyes were steady. "Then we will grow larger inside ourselves. Our ship may be small, but our spirit is not." The room grew quiet, each crew member reflecting on his words. It was not pride that filled them, but calm determination. They had no illusions about the strength of their vessel. They knew their cannons could not match the firepower of new fleets. They knew their shields could not hold as long. But they also knew no one could match their will to endure. Later, as the Horizon left the station and drifted back into the darkness of space, The stars stretched before them like a vast sea. The crew settled into their stations, engines humming softly, weapons charged and ready. From the outside, the ship still looked like a laughingstock. To anyone watching, it was just an old vessel wandering aimlessly. But inside, the crew was awake, alert, and waiting. They had faced ridicule many times. Now, with war spreading across the galaxy, they would have their chance to show the truth. The horizon was more than metal and circuits. It was a shield, a spear, and a promise. And though no one else saw it yet, the day was coming when this overlooked ship would carry the weight of battles greater than any fleet imagined. War came not with whispers, but with thunder. The first reports arrived as fragments scattered across communication lines. Outposts at the edge of known space had fallen. Colonies once filled with light were now silent. Entire defense stations had been turned into ruins in a matter of hours. The enemy was unlike anything the galaxy had faced before. Their fleet was vast, their ships shaped like jagged shadows across the stars. They moved with precision, as if one mind guided thousands of vessels at once. Their weapons tore through shields as though they were paper. Stories told of fleets crumbling before they had even fired a second volley. The galaxy's great powers responded with pride. They gathered their strongest warships, gleaming and new, into massive formations. Admirals boasted that the enemy would fall quickly. In grand halls, they declared that their technology, their numbers, and their strategies would crush the invaders. Confidence filled their voices, but behind their eyes lay the first flicker of fear. The horizon received its orders during this storm of preparation. It was not called to the front lines where the great fleets assembled. Instead, it was assigned to a forgotten sector near unremarkable trade routes. The message was clear. The galaxy's leaders did not expect the old ship to make a difference. Commander Varro read the orders aloud to the crew. His voice was calm, though his eyes held a steady fire. We are to remain on patrol. We will not join the first wave. The fleets believe they can win this war without us. Torin let out a low chuckle from his seat in engineering. Let them think that. The longer we are ignored, the better our chances to prepare. Mira, seated at the gunnery console, adjusted the old cannons. If the enemy comes this way, we will not run. We will give them something to remember. Kair, his hands resting lightly on the pilot controls, frowned. Do you think the great fleets will hold? Varro did not answer at once. He looked at the stars through the viewport, the endless sea of light that stretched across the black. Finally, he said, I believe they will fight with all they have, but I also believe the enemy is stronger than they know. We must be ready for what comes after. The war began with fire. The great fleets met the enemy at the border systems, where proud admirals led thousands of ships into battle. For a time, it seemed the galaxy might prevail. Reports spoke of enemy vessels destroyed, of victories claimed, of cheers ringing across command decks. But then the tide turned. The enemy adapted quickly. Where one ship fell, two more took its place. Their formations shifted like flowing water, impossible to predict. Their weapons grew fiercer with each clash. Soon the proud fleets were not celebrating. They were calling for reinforcements. The horizon received broken signals from these battles. Static filled the air, but the words that cut through were grim. Shields failing. They are everywhere, we cannot hold. The crew listened in silence. Each voice carried the weight of fleets collapsing, of thousands of lives lost in the darkness. Varro stood at the center of the bridge, his expression hardening with every report. At last, the channels went silent. No more messages came. Only the stars remained, cold and distant. Kair broke the silence. If the fleets fall, what chance do we have? Mira looked at him sharply. We have the chance we always had. To survive, to outthink them. That is more than those fleets had. Torin added, the enemy may break ships apart, but they cannot break the spirit inside us. Remember that. Varro raised his hand to quiet them. The fleets believed victory was theirs because of their size and strength. That is why they fell. We will not make that mistake. We know who we are. We know our limits. And that makes us dangerous in ways they cannot see. Days passed and the war spread. System after system fell. Worlds that had once laughed at the horizon now cried out for help, but no one came. The galaxy's leaders who had promised swift victory were silent. Their fleets lay scattered, their ships drifting as wrecks across the void. The horizon remained alone in its sector, patrolling the quiet lanes. Outwardly, it seemed untouched by the chaos. Yet within the walls of the ship, the crew prepared. Every cannon was checked, every engine tuned, every strategy reviewed. One night, as the ship drifted near the rings of a silent planet, Varro walked the length of the corridor. He saw his crew working, their faces lit by dim lamps and console screens. Tired eyes, steady hands, hearts bound by determination. They were not the strongest nor the fastest, but they were ready. Standing at the viewport, Varro whispered to himself, "The storm is coming, and when it reaches us, we will show them who we are." Far beyond their sector, the enemy fleet pressed deeper into the galaxy. The great powers had fallen. The mighty warships had been shattered. And yet, in the shadows of forgotten trade routes, one small vessel prepared to face the darkness with the strength of its crew and the unyielding spirit of humanity. The galaxy had overlooked the horizon. Soon it would learn that this had been its greatest mistake. The war spread like a fire no one could control. Entire sectors burned under the shadow of the enemy armada. Where once shining fleets had stood proud, only wreckage remained drifting through the stars. Colonies fell silent, and outposts that had sworn loyalty to their great fleets now sent desperate calls for aid that never came. Through all this chaos, the horizon kept to its patrol in the quiet sector. Its orders had not changed, though the galaxy around it was collapsing. For weeks, the crew listened to the fragments of distress signals that echoed through space. Some came from ships they had once seen docked in stations, their crews laughing at the old human vessel. Now their voices cried out for help before fading into silence. Inside the command deck, the mood grew heavier with each passing day. The crew knew the storm would reach them soon. Commander Varro gathered them one evening as the ship orbited a nameless planet, whose rings glowed faintly in the light of a distant sun. "The fleets are gone," Varro said quietly. "No one else will stand in their way now. It will fall to ships like ours to resist." Kyer frowned at the controls. "But how can we resist them, Commander? Their ships are larger. Their weapons cut through shields like they are nothing. Even the strongest fleets were destroyed." Mira, who rarely spoke, answered before Varro could. Her voice was calm but sharp. "Those fleets lost because they tried to fight strength with strength. That has never been our way. We fight with our minds, not with our size," Torin added. "The Horizon has never been a ship of glory. It has always been a ship of survival. That is what makes us dangerous. We endure, and we strike when no one expects it." Varro nodded. "The enemy expects us to flee. They will think a ship like ours will not dare to fight. That belief will be our greatest weapon." It was not long before their chance came. The Horizon was passing near a cluster of asteroid fields when its sensors detected movement. At first it seemed like a scattering of rocks drifting from the field, but then shapes emerged from the shadows. Sleek, dark vessels slipped into view, their hulls reflecting no light, their movements precise. "Enemy scouts, they are here," Kyer whispered, his fingers tightening on the controls. Varro's voice was steady. "Stay calm. This is our chance to show them." The scouts advanced, their weapons glowing faintly. The enemy believed they had found easy prey. To them, the horizon looked like nothing more than a weak target to clear from their path. "Bring us closer to the asteroids," Varro ordered. Kyer guided the ship into the dense field of rocks. Larger ships avoided such places, afraid of damaging their hulls. But the Horizon had spent years navigating dangerous paths. Its pilot trusted every movement, weaving the ship between tumbling stones with skill that larger vessels could never match. The enemy followed, confident in their power. Yet their sleek frames were less agile. Each turn slowed them. Each dodge left them open for a moment longer than they expected. "Mira," Varro said, his eyes fixed on the sensors. "Ready," she answered, fingers moving across her console. The old cannons roared to life, their beams striking the first scout ship. To the enemy, it must have seemed absurd that such ancient weapons could harm them. But Mira knew where to aim. Her shots found weak points in the joints of their armor. The scout shuddered, its engines flickering before it tore apart in a burst of fire. Another scout closed in, firing bright streams of energy. Kyer twisted the Horizon through the asteroid field. Using the massive rocks as cover, beams struck stone instead of metal, and fragments scattered like shrapnel, forcing the enemy to slow down. "Now," Varro said. Torin had prepared a trap. He had modified one of the ship's old mining charges, strapping it to a drifting asteroid. As the enemy ship drew close, the charge detonated. The explosion hurled the rock into the vessel's side, crushing its hull. Cheers filled the command deck as the scouts split apart. The final enemy vessel turned to retreat, Realizing too late that this prey was not what it seemed, Mira fired once more, her cannon shot piercing through the engines. The ship spun helplessly before colliding with an asteroid, vanishing in a silent bloom of fire. Silence followed. The asteroid field drifted calmly once again as if nothing had happened. The crew stared at the screens, their breaths heavy. They had done what no one else believed possible. The Horizon had stood against the enemy and won. Care broke the silence first. We actually destroyed them. His voice was half disbelief, half pride. Torin grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead. They thought we were a joke. Now they know better. Varro did not smile, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. This was only the beginning. The enemy will not ignore us now, but let them come. Each time they underestimate us, we will strike. And each time we strike, the galaxy will remember that humans do not bow. Word of the battle spread through hidden channels. Survivors from other fleets whispered of a human ship, old and scarred, that had turned an asteroid field into a battlefield and destroyed the enemy scouts. No one had believed the Horizon capable of such a feat. But now its name began to carry weight. For the first time since the war had begun, hope stirred in the shadows of despair. The crew of the Horizon did not celebrate with cheers or parades. They simply returned to their stations, checked their weapons, and prepared for the next encounter. They knew this victory was small compared to the storm ahead, yet it was a spark, and sparks had a way of growing into flames. As the ship glided once more into the sea of stars, the galaxy began to whisper a new story. The warship no one had taken seriously had drawn first blood. The destruction of the enemy scouts changed everything. For weeks, the galaxy had only heard of losses, of fleets crushed, of systems falling one after another. The first whisper of resistance came not from a mighty armada, but from an old, battered human warship, drifting on the edge of forgotten space. At first, many did not believe the story. How could the Horizon, a vessel mocked for its age, defeat even a fragment of the enemy fleet? The tale spread through hidden channels, carried by traders and scattered survivors. The name of the ship became a quiet murmur among those who still clung to hope. Some dismissed it as rumor. Others saw it as proof that not all was lost. On the Horizon, the crew did not celebrate. Victory meant survival, nothing more. Commander Varro gathered them again on the command deck. His voice was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of what they had done. "We struck first," he said, "but that will not go unnoticed. The enemy will return in greater numbers. They will want to erase us before the story grows." Mira adjusted her cannons, her face steady. "Then let them come. Every battle teaches us more. Every fight makes us sharper." Torin leaned on the console, grease still on his hands from repairing the engines. "The ship held together this time, but we must keep it ready. If they bring a full squadron, one mistake will finish us." Kyre, still young but hardened by the last battle, asked, "Do you think others will join us now? Will the survivors rally?" Varro's answer was simple. "They will not come yet. They are afraid, but when the time comes, they will look for a flame to follow. Until then, we hold the torch alone." That flame burned brighter sooner than they expected. The enemy returned, not with 3 scouts, but with an entire wing of ships. Their jagged hulls glimmered faintly in the darkness as they approached the sector. The Horizon stood alone against them, its single frame dwarfed by the scale of the threat. "This is it," Care whispered, gripping the controls. "Steady," Varro ordered. "Remember what we are. Not the strongest, not the fastest, but the cleverest. That will be enough." They lured the enemy once again into treacherous space. This time it was a dense nebula where sensors failed and visibility was poor. The enemy advanced confidently, believing their numbers would overwhelm the lone vessel. Inside the haze, the Horizon vanished. Kyre guided the ship through twisting clouds, cutting power at key moments to mask their signal. Mira fired bursts only when certain, striking from the mist and disappearing again. Torin kept the engines alive despite the strain, patching and rewiring with hands that moved as fast as thought. One by one, the enemy ships fell. Some collided with the nebula's unstable currents. Others burned under precise cannon fire. The Horizon moved like a phantom, never where the enemy expected, always striking where they were weakest. When the last ship finally exploded in silence, the nebula drifted calmly once more. The Horizon emerged scarred, its hull cracked but alive. The crew sat in silence, their breaths heavy, knowing what they had achieved. This time there was no doubt. Survivors from distant fleets had picked up fragments of the battle. Traders saw the enemy wreckage drifting from the nebula. The whispers became stronger, spreading faster than before. The galaxy learned of the human ship that had defied the enemy again. For those who had mocked the horizon, the laughter faded. For those who had lost hope, the name became a spark of courage. Small bands of survivors began sending signals, asking if the rumors were true, asking if there was still someone fighting. Commander Varro received those signals, his jaw tight as he listened. He knew what it meant. The horizon was no longer invisible. It had become a symbol. That brought strength, but it also brought danger. He gathered his crew once more. The galaxy is watching us now. They will expect us to fight for them, to lead them. But understand this, we cannot win this war alone. We are the spark, nothing more. Yet sparks can grow into flames if we feed them. Mira looked at him with calm eyes. Then let us burn brighter, Torin nodded. We have shown the enemy twice that we will not bow. Let them learn it again and again. Care sat straighter at his station. If others see us, maybe they will rise too. Maybe they will fight beside us. Varro's gaze swept over them. Perhaps. But even if no one comes, we will stand. Because we are human and humans endure. Outside, the stars stretched cold and endless. The enemy fleet pressed deeper into the galaxy, leaving ruins where once proud civilizations had stood. But now in those ruins there was a name whispered in secret, a name that carried defiance, courage, and a promise. The Horizon. It was no longer just a warship. It was the beginning of a turning tide. The galaxy had reached its darkest hour. System after system lay in ruins, their defenders crushed by the endless tide of the enemy armada. The great fleets were gone, their proud ships scattered as wrecks across the stars. In their place, only whispers of the horizon remained. To many, that name had become the last light in the night, a story that gave strength when nothing else could. But the enemy had heard those whispers too, and they were determined to silence them. It began when sensors on the horizon detected movement at the edge of the sector. The screen lit up with more signatures than the crew had ever seen. Dozens of enemy ships, large and small, advancing in formation. They were not scouts. They were not a single wing. This was a hunting pack sent to erase the lone human vessel that had dared to stand against them. The bridge fell silent as the enemy approached. Cair's hands tightened on the controls, his knuckles pale. Mira's eyes narrowed as she checked the cannons. Torin muttered calculations under his breath, already thinking of ways to keep the engines alive under impossible strain. Commander Varro stood at the center, calm but steady, his mind moving faster than the stars outside. He knew they could not fight this fleet ship by ship. The horizon was clever, but not invincible. If they stayed in open space, they would be overwhelmed. The only chance was to turn the enemy's strength against them. We cannot match their numbers, Varro said, his voice firm. But numbers mean nothing if they cannot fight together. We will break them apart. We will make the battlefield our weapon. The plan was dangerous, perhaps impossible, but the crew trusted him as they always had. Cair guided the ship toward a nearby nebula, a swirling storm of gas and energy. Inside, visibility was poor, and unstable currents made navigation deadly. Larger ships avoided such places, but for the horizon, it was the perfect battleground. The enemy followed, confident in their power. To them, the nebula was just another place to sweep clean. They had no reason to fear the scarred human vessel ahead. Inside the storm, the horizon moved like a shadow. Cair wove through the twisting clouds with skill born of instinct. Mira fired carefully, each shot aimed not to destroy outright, but to draw the enemy deeper, to lure them into the trap. Torin worked furiously in engineering, rerouting power, overloading systems, and preparing charges that could ignite the nebula itself. The enemy pressed forward, their formation breaking as they tried to hunt down the smaller ship. Varro watched the sensors, his eyes sharp. Now, he ordered. Torin triggered the first charge. A cluster of unstable gas ignited, erupting in a chain of explosions that lit the nebula with blinding light. Several enemy ships were caught in the blast, their hulls tearing apart in silence. The rest scattered in confusion. The horizon struck again and again, striking from the mist, then vanishing. Each attack was precise, each movement calculated. But the enemy still outnumbered them, and for every ship destroyed, more pressed forward. On the bridge, alarms blared as enemy fire grazed the hull. The ship shook violently, panels sparking. Cair gritted his teeth, forcing the vessel through the chaos. "We cannot keep this up forever," he shouted. Varro's voice cut through the noise. We do not need forever. We need one final blow. The commander's plan was simple and deadly. Torin had prepared the largest charge yet, placed deep within the heart of the nebula where the gases were thickest. If the enemy could be lured there, the chain reaction would ignite the entire field. It would destroy everything within it, including the horizon. When Varro explained, the crew did not protest. They had always known their ship was more than steel. It was a symbol, and symbols sometimes demanded sacrifice. Mira adjusted her cannons. If this is the end, let us make it count. Kair's hand steadied on the controls. Then we fly straight into the storm. Torin's voice was rough but firm. I will light the fire when you give the word. The trap was set. The horizon plunged deeper into the nebula, firing at enemy ships to draw them close. The fleet followed, their captains eager to finish the fight. Step by step, they moved into the heart of the storm. At last, the enemy surrounded them. Weapons charged, ships closing in from every direction. On the bridge, the crew exchanged quiet glances. There was no fear now, only resolve. Varro's voice was calm. Now, Torin! The engineer pressed the final switch. The nebula erupted in a wave of fire that shook the heavens. Explosions raced across the clouds, swallowing ship after ship. The enemy fleet was consumed in the storm, their formations torn apart, their vessels shattered. For a moment, the stars themselves seemed to burn. When the fire cleared, silence returned. Wreckage drifted through the nebula. The remains of the fleet scattered like dust. And through that silence, against all odds, the horizon emerged. Scarred, cracked, and barely holding together but alive, the crew sat in stunned quiet. They had expected to die, yet their ship had endured once again. Mira lowered her hands from the cannons. Kair leaned back, breathless but smiling. Torin wiped his forehead, exhausted but proud. Varro looked at them all, his voice steady. We have done what no one else could. We stood against the storm and broke it. Let the galaxy see. Let them remember. Humanity does not fall. Outside, the wreckage of the enemy fleet drifted in silence. The tide of war had shifted. And at the center of it all was the warship no one had taken seriously, standing as proof that the smallest spark could ignite a fire strong enough to change the fate of the stars. The nebula still glowed faintly from the great explosion, its edges painted with drifting fire. Wreckage floated across the silent expanse, the broken remains of the enemy fleet. Where once a swarm of dark vessels had hunted with certainty, now there was only ruin. And at the center of it all, scarred and battered, the horizon moved slowly through the quiet sea of stars. Its hull was cracked, panels burned, and engines sputtered with sparks. By all logic, it should not have survived. Yet it had. The warship no one had taken seriously, the relic mocked by so many, had faced the storm and endured. Inside the bridge, the crew sat in silence, their bodies weary, but their eyes alive with fire. Mira leaned back from her cannons, her steady hands finally still. Torin slumped against the wall, grease and sweat covering his face, but his grin wide with triumph. Kair's fingers hovered above the controls, trembling from exhaustion, but he could not hide the spark of pride in his eyes. Commander Varro stood tall at the center, his gaze sweeping across the damaged panels and weary faces. We are still here, he said softly. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of 1,000 victories. The crew let the moment settle before Mira broke the silence. The galaxy will hear of this. They will know the enemy can be beaten. Torin gave a short laugh. And they will know it was done by the ship they laughed at. Kair leaned forward, his young face serious. Do you think they will rally now? Do you think others will rise? Varro's eyes were steady as he looked out at the wreckage beyond. They will. Not all at once, but they will. Courage spreads like fire, and today we lit a flame they cannot extinguish. Word traveled quickly. Survivors from ruined fleets picked up the signals. Traders passing through the nebula saw the remains of the enemy. Stories began to flow across hidden channels and into quiet stations. The tale grew larger with every telling. They spoke of the human warship that had turned the nebula itself into a weapon. They spoke of how it had stood against impossible odds and emerged alive. The name Horizon became a symbol. No longer a joke, no longer a relic. It was spoken with respect, with hope, with awe. To some, it was proof that humanity carried something the enemy could not understand. To others, it was the beginning of resistance. Small bands of survivors started to gather, their voices asking if the Horizon still fought, if they could join, if there was still a chance. On the bridge, the crew received these signals. one after another, broken voices asking for guidance, desperate calls seeking a leader. They were no longer alone. The galaxy was beginning to stir. Barrow gathered his crew once more. His voice was calm but filled with strength. We have become more than a ship. We have become a promise. Every vessel that rises now will look to us. They will believe because we stood when no one else could. That is our legacy, and that legacy will guide the galaxy through this war. Mira adjusted her cannons, though they were scorched and worn. Then we fight not only for ourselves, but for every survivor who looks to us. Torin nodded, determination in his tired eyes. I will keep the ship alive no matter what it takes. We cannot fail them now. Care straightened at the controls. If others join us, the enemy will learn fear. Not from numbers, but from the will they cannot crush. Varro placed a hand on the worn metal beside him. The horizon was never meant to be a symbol. But symbols choose themselves. We will carry this role with honor. We will show the galaxy that humans endure, no matter the storm. Outside, the stars stretched endless and cold. But for the first time since the war began, there was warmth in the silence. The enemy fleet had been broken. The tide of despair had shifted, and though battles still lay ahead, the galaxy now carried a flame that could not be put out. The horizon turned slowly away from the nebula, its engines straining but steady. It left behind the wreckage of its enemies and carried forward a story that would travel farther than any fleet. A story of survival, of defiance, of humanity standing firm when all others had fallen. Generations would tell the tale of that ship. Children would grow up hearing of the day the smallest vessel turned the tide, and in every retelling the lesson would remain the same. Never underestimate humanity. For humans may not be the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the most advanced, but they are the most determined. And in the vast silence of the galaxy, determination can be stronger than any weapon. The horizon pressed on into the stars, scarred but unbroken, carrying its crew and its legacy into the battles yet to come. The war was not over. The enemy still threatened every world, every life. But now the galaxy had a beacon, and the beacon's name was whispered with pride. The warship no one had taken seriously had become the ship that could not be ignored. It was the spark that turned despair into resistance. It was the fire that lit the path to victory. It was the horizon,